Somewhere in America, someone's at a Costco meat case about to overpay for a steak, and it isn't their fault. That case is built to make you do it. That ribeye 4-pack at $16 a pound has a twin a few feet away, same muscle, one rib up the animal that an old Texas butcher grabs instead for around $5. It's called the chuck eye. By the end of this, you'll read that whole case like you cut it yourself. Same muscle, same rich cap of fat that makes a ribeye worth eating for the price of ground chuck. Let me tell you where I learned this. It isn't a trick I found online last week. I came up behind a meat counter in Central Texas, and the man who trained me learned it from the man who trained him. That chain runs back further than you'd guess. The barbecue this state is famous for wasn't born in a restaurant with a neon sign. It was born in German and Czech butcher shops in little towns like Lockhart and Elgin and Luling back in the 1800s. Croy's Market over in Lockhart has been selling meat since 1900. These were meat markets first, restaurants second. During the week, they sold fresh cuts to farm families, and whatever tougher beef didn't move by Saturday night got salted and smoked slow over post oak so it wouldn't spoil in the heat. Folks started coming in just for that smoked meat, and the butcher shop quietly became a barbecue joint, which means the whole tradition sits on one plain idea. You use the entire animal. Nothing good gets thrown out, and nothing good gets walked past. Hold on to that, because it is the actual secret, and everything I show you from here is just that idea with a knife in its hand. Let me take you back to the day I learned the lesson myself, because I was exactly the shopper I'm describing. I was maybe 19, working the counter, and I thought I knew steak. A rancher came in, watched me reach for the ribeye to cut his order, and asked me one question. Which muscle is that? Not what grade, not what price. Which muscle? And I stood there, holding a $20 steak with no answer for him. So he had me cut 2 steaks, a ribeye and something from the front of the shoulder, trim them the same, salt them the same, and cook them side by side. Then he made me taste them without looking. I picked the cheap one. I picked it twice. That rancher grinned at me like he'd been waiting his whole life to do it, and he said, "Son, the sticker on that meat gets decided by where one saw blade falls on one carcass." The cow never got the memo. So, before we even get to the cut, you have to understand the 2 different things you're actually paying for at that case, because people mix them up constantly, and it costs them. The first thing is the grade. That's the prime, choice, or select stamp, and it's a federal grader's red on marbling, the little threads of fat inside the muscle. Prime is the top rung, roughly the top 2% of beef, and Costco selling prime at meat counter prices is one of the best things about the place. Choice is the everyday good stuff. Select is leaner and can cook up dry. That grade is a useful signal, and I'm not telling you to ignore it, but grade is only one lever. The second lever, the one nobody's talking to you about, is the cut, which muscle you're holding. And here's what took me years to see clearly. A choice chuck eye, that $5 shoulder steak, will out-eat a select ribeye almost every single time, because it's carrying more of the muscles that were built to taste good in the first place. Grade tells you how much fat is marbled through a cut. The cut tells you whether you even want that muscle. You need both. The store is happy to sell you a high grade of a lazy muscle and let you think you won. Now the cut itself, and once this clicks, the meat case stops being a store and turns into a map. A steer gets broken into big sections the trade calls primals. The rib primal, where your ribeye lives, runs from the 6th rib back to the 12th. Right in front of it, toward the shoulder, sits the chuck, and the border between them, that hard line separating a $16 steak from a $5 one, falls right between the 5th rib and the 6th. So what is that line? It's pure bookkeeping. The muscles inside the animal don't change one bit when the saw crosses from one side of it to the other. Picture a ribeye for a second. It looks like one solid piece, but it's 2 muscles joined by a seam of fat. There's the big round center, the eye, which the books call the longissimus. And curled over the top of it, there's a crescent. a ribbon of darker, deeply marbled meat that follows the curve. That's the spinalis. Butchers call it the cap or the decal. If you've ever peeled that top strip off a cooked ribeye and eaten it first because it's the best bite on the whole plate, then your mouth already knows what your wallet doesn't. That cap is widely called the most flavorful single muscle on the entire steer. More marbling than the eye, more tender, almost buttery when the heat renders it down. That strip is the prize. Here's the fact that should make you a little bit angry. Those two muscles, the eye and that gorgeous cap, do not stop politely at the sixth rib so the register can ring you up for more. They keep running forward, over the primal line into the shoulder. So when a butcher cuts a steak off the front of the chuck, at that fifth rib, he gets a steak with the same eye and the same cap inside it. That steak is the chuck eye. Same longissimus, same spinalis. It carries a little more of the shoulder's working muscle, which is the one honest trade-off, and it's why the chuck eye runs a touch firmer than a true ribeye. But in the most literal anatomical sense, it is a ribeye that got born one rib too far forward and had to go take a cheaper job. And it gets better in a way I did not believe until I saw it on the cutting board. On a ribeye, that prized cap muscle is biggest at the chuck end and shrinks as you move back toward the loin. So a chuck eye, sitting at the front of the line, often carries a bigger cap than a ribeye cut from the back of the rack. Sit with that one. The cheap steak can hold more of the best muscle on the animal than the expensive steak does. No catch. Same two muscles, sometimes in a better ratio, for a third of the money. All you gave up was the three letters RIB on a label. So why doesn't the whole world already do this? Two reasons, and the first one is just cold arithmetic the store is quietly counting on. There are only about 2 chuck eye steaks on an entire animal. 2, a whole steer, 1,300 pounds on the hoof, gives up maybe 2 of these. So nobody's stacking them in a big pretty pyramid up front under the good lighting. They sell out early to the people who know, they get tucked down low in the corner of the case, and half the time the label does them no favors. The second reason is you. Not you personally, but all of us, trained over about 100 years of menus and marketing to want one word. Ribeye, that name got famous, so the demand piled onto the rib section and dragged its price up, while the word chuck got saddled with the reputation of tough pot roast and got dragged down, best muscle and all. A steakhouse will happily peel that cap off a ribeye, cook it alone, and sell it back to you as a premium special for the price of 2 whole chuck eyes, and you'll thank them for it. The price on that glass case is mostly a demand meter. It climbs with the size of the crowd fighting over a name, and it barely reads the meat at all. Which brings us straight to the trap, because this is exactly where a shopper hears cheap steak from the chuck, grabs the wrong thing, cooks it like a ribeye, chews it like a boot, and swears the whole idea is a lie. The chuck is a big primal, and a lot of it is tough. Chuck roast, your classic pot roast, is packed with connective tissue, and it will fight your jaw if you throw it on a hot grill. That meat needs 3 hours in a low oven to surrender and go tender. So when you go hunting, you are not grabbing anything just because the word chuck is printed on it. You want 2 specific words together. Chuck eye steak, chuck eye roll, boneless chuck eye. That's the back of the shoulder cut we've been talking about. And it cooks in 15 minutes like a fine steak, not like a Sunday roast. And here's how you confirm it with your own eyes, even when the label is vague. It'll look like a slightly smaller, slightly messier ribeye. You'll see that round eye of muscle, and right beside it you'll see a curl of darker, fat-streaked meat with a clean line of fat running between the two. That fat seam is the whole tell. That's the cap meeting the eye, the exact thing a plain chuck steak won't show you. Learn that shape. And if the case is picked clean, you do the thing hardly anyone does anymore. You walk up and talk to the person behind the counter. You ask them kindly to cut you a couple of chuck eye steaks off the chuck eye roll, 1.25 inches thick. 9 times out of 10 they'll do it on the spot and hand you the best value in the entire building. All right, you found it, you didn't get faked out by a roast, and you've got 2 beautiful chuck eyes for $5 a pound. Now comes the step that decides everything, because a chuck eye, rewards a cook who pays attention, and punishes one who doesn't. That extra bit of shoulder muscle means you're working with maybe 80 to 90% of a ribeye's tenderness, and how you handle the finish is what closes that last gap or blows it wide open. So I'm going to give you the 2 moves an old Texas counter would use, and neither one costs you a dime. The first move is salt, and it's the one everybody rushes. It's called a dry brine, and you can forget the word brine because there's no water in it. It's salt, straight onto the naked meat, and then patience. What happens in there is kind of beautiful. At first, the salt pulls a bead of moisture up to the surface, so for about 10 minutes the steak looks wet and you're sure you've wrecked it. Then it turns around. That surface moisture dissolves the salt into a tight little brine, and the meat drinks it right back in, carrying the salt deep down into the muscle where it loosens the proteins. That does 2 jobs at once. It seasons the steak all the way through instead of just painting the outside, and it relaxes those fibers so a firmer cut eats more tender. Salt is also the only seasoning that travels all the way inside the meat. Your black pepper and your garlic sit up on the surface and do their work there, which is fine, but salt is the one going deep. Give it 40 minutes on the counter if you're short on time. If you've got the evening, salt it and set it uncovered on a rack in the fridge overnight, and one more thing happens that matters. The surface dries out completely, and a bone-dry surface is the whole ballgame for the crust you're about to build. Which is the second move, and it is the most Texas thing in this entire video. It's the reverse sear, and if you think about how the old pitmasters worked, you already understand it in your bones. They never blasted the meat with hard fire first. They took it low and slow through smoke, patient, then finished it hot at the end. You're going to do that exact thing to a steak. Put that dry brain chuck eye in a low oven at 250 degrees, or better yet in a smoker running around 275 with a few chunks of post oak if you've got a pit, and let it climb gently until the inside reads about 115 to 120 degrees on a thermometer. Trust the number. Cooking it slow like this brings it up evenly from edge to center, so there's no thick gray overcooked band under the surface, just rosy pink the whole way through. Then you pull it, let it rest a couple minutes, and pat that surface bone dry with a paper towel, because any moisture there is going to steam instead of sear. Bone dry, then heat. Now you get your cast iron skillet as hot as it will physically go until it's just starting to smoke, and you lay the steak down, 45 seconds, maybe a minute, aside. You'll hear it before you see it, that violent sizzle, and the smell of beef fat hitting screaming iron is going to roll through your whole kitchen. That fast sear takes it up to a final 130, 135 for a perfect medium rare, and it'll coast up another 5 degrees while it rests. Salt, low heat, hard finish. That is a $5 steak wearing the crust and the flavor a steakhouse staples a $20 name onto, and the person eating it will not be able to tell you it came off the shoulder. Not once. That whole method, the salt and the timing and the temperatures, plus my full cut-by-cut cheat sheet for walking a warehouse meat case without getting robbed. All lives in one guide I put together called the Texas Barbecue Playbook. Scan the QR on screen or grab the link in the description. No rush. But do not leave yet, because I promised you the butcher's secret, and everything so far has been the appetizer. There's one move that even folks who already know all about the chuck eye almost never make. It's the closest thing to a cheat code I have ever found in a grocery store, and it's the moment this stops being a clever tip and becomes the whole way of seeing I told you about at the start. Stop buying steaks. I mean that literally. Stop buying anything the store has already sliced into steaks for you, because the instant they cut it, they charge you for the labor, the packaging, and the pretty foam tray under the plastic. Instead, you buy the whole subprimal. That's the big, uncut, untrimmed piece the individual steaks get sliced off of, and the warehouse sells it for a fraction per pound. A whole ribeye roll at Costco has been running somewhere around $13 to $15 a pound, while the same beef, cut into steaks and set a few feet over, sits closer to 16 or 18. Out at a regular grocery store, those same steaks can climb past 27 a pound. So you carry that whole roll home, you spend 15 quiet minutes with a knife you already own, and you cut your own steaks exactly as thick as you like to eat them. A woman did this on the morning news not long ago. She took a 21-pound whole ribeye, sliced it into about 15 steaks right there on her own counter, and saved close to $300 against what her local store wanted for the same pile of meat. And you don't need a butcher skill to do it. You need a sharp knife and a cutting board that won't slide. You cut against the grain, steaks 1.5 inches thick so they hold up to that reverse sear, and whatever you're not eating this week goes into freezer bags with the air pressed out, laid flat so they thaw fast and stack neat. One roll turns into a month of steak nights, portioned the way you want them, at a price that used to buy you 2 dinners. The freezer is the quiet half of butcher logic. You buy the whole thing the day the price is smart, then stretch it across a month of steak nights on what used to buy you 2 dinners. But the money is only half the reason I love it. Here's what hooked me on this trade for good. When you break down that whole roll yourself, you get the pieces the store never puts in front of you. Remember that cap, the spinalis, the best muscle on the animal? When you're the one holding the knife, you slide it right along that fat seam and peel the entire cap off in one long strip. Roll it up, tie it with a loop of butcher's twine, and you've made yourself a ribeye cap roast. Fancy butchers sell that for a small fortune when they bother to offer it at all. You made it for the plain blended price of the roll you already bought. The trim off the ends goes into your grinder for the best burgers you've ever put on a bun. The hard fat you carve away, you render slow into tallow and cook potatoes in it that'll ruin you for anything else. Nothing walks past you. Nothing hits the trash. And that habit, seeing the whole animal at once, is the real old Texas butcher secret. Go back to that 5th rib and those 2 lonely chuck-eye steaks per animal and ask yourself who, for 100 years, has been quietly setting those aside before they ever reached the case. The butcher. He wasn't hiding them from you out of spite. He just knew exactly what they were, because he'd trained his eye to read the whole animal instead of the price tags somebody stuck on its pieces. Learn to see it the way he does, and that case can never fool you again. And the day you can, the entire case cracks open for you. That picanha nobody reaches for. The top sirloin cap with the thick fat lid, under $9 a pound, and it grills like a dream over a hot fire. The Denver steak, carved from deep in that same shoulder. Some of the most heavily marbled beef on the whole steer, sitting there for pennies on the ribeye dollar. The flat iron, they are all right there in the cold glass, cheap, waiting on the one shopper in 50 who knows what they're actually looking at. So here's a question worth chewing on, and it's bigger than one steak. Keep paying the ribeye tax for 3 letters on a sticker, or walk up to that case like you cut it yourself and carry home the best beef in the building for cheap stuff prices? Go find the chuck-eye this weekend. If the case is empty, ask for the chuck-eye roll and watch their face when you know the words. Then tell me in the comments what a ribeye runs at your Costco. Next time, we break down a whole packer brisket without wasting a bite.